Good afternoon, and thank you all for being here today. You know, at its core, the government's most basic responsibility is to protect its citizens and residents. My top priority is and has always been and will always be ensuring the safety of all Mississippians. We're seeing it every night on Jackson's local news, a never-ending cycle of violent crime. This is not what Jackson is and does not reflect who we are as a city or who we are as a state. For Jackson to reach its full potential, residents must be able to satisfy one of their most basic fundamental needs: safety and security. They're not asking for much. They're just asking for the ability to walk down the street and not fear for their lives. I stand with the residents of the city of Jackson, and that's why today I'm announcing a new initiative aimed at upholding public safety in our state's capital city. Now, two pieces of legislation passed this year that I signed into law, which are going to help us begin this process. One piece of legislation that I signed into law moved the Capitol Police from the Department of Finance and Administration to our state's Department of Public Safety. The other removed the prohibition from the Mississippi Highway Patrol for doing certain things within the city limits. To have a safe Jackson, we must have a safe downtown. So beginning tomorrow, the Department of Public Safety divisions will increase their presence and visibility throughout the Capitol Complex Improvement District. To our residents and those looking to relocate and those looking to invest in our capital city, I make this commitment to you. My administration will do whatever it takes to help keep downtown Jackson safe. And if you're a resident or if you work here, you can help us. Two things you can do to help us. In the event of an emergency, call 911. If you see something, say something. If you have information on a crime, call our Central Mississippi Crime Stoppers at 601-355-TIPS. That's 601-355-8477. All callers will remain anonymous. Now, as has always been the case during my tenure, it's important that we set expectations from the beginning. I want to be clear. This initiative will help. It is a good first step, but it will not solve all crime problems in the city of Jackson overnight. This is just one step towards reducing crime in our capital city. I'd like to thank Commissioner Tyndall and the men and women of our Department of Public Safety, the Mississippi Highway Patrol, Capitol Police, and others. Without them and their commitment, this effort to keep our community safer wouldn't be possible. So at this time, I'm going to ask the Commissioner of Public Safety, Sean Tyndall, to come forward. Commissioner.
Thank you, Governor Reeves, for your leadership and your call for the Mississippi Department of Public Safety to launch the Capital Safety Initiative. As the Governor has mentioned, House Bill 974, which transferred the Capitol Police to the Department of Public Safety, and Senate Bill 2788, which allowed the Mississippi Highway Patrol to operate stationary radar within larger cities, gave us the greater opportunity to help the city of Jackson and our capital city by utilizing state assets and resources to help protect the citizens of the state of Mississippi, and in particular, those within the capital city. Here with me today, I have Lieutenant Colonel Malachi Sanders, Director of the Uniform Division of the Mississippi Highway Patrol, Colonel Stephen Maxwell, Director of the Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics, Chief Don Byington, Director of the Mississippi Capitol Police. I also have Troopers Ivana Williams and Eric Jones, Major John Polis, Officers Christy Welcher and Robert Jones here with us today. I'd like to ask everybody to keep Colonel Randy Ginn in their thoughts and prayers. His father was in an accident this morning in northeast Mississippi and is at a hospital in Tupelo, or he would have been here as well. I want to recognize these individuals because it's with their leadership and experience that we were able to launch this initiative. And it's one of the reasons why I know the legislature and the governor supported these changes to help bring together state law enforcement to provide greater safety and resources for the citizens of this state. With the Capital Safety Initiative, the citizens will see a greater presence of state law enforcement operating within the city of Jackson. The Mississippi Highway Patrol will be operating saturation units along the I-55, I-20, and I-220 corridors, as well as state highways located within the city. Within the Capitol Complex District, Capitol Police will be saturating its resources along the streets of the Capitol District, ensuring that all available Capitol Police officers are mobilized in their vehicles, creating a greater visibility within the Capitol District. As many of you know, the Capitol District extends from Jackson State University all the way to I-55 and up into the Fondren area or just past the University of Mississippi Medical Center. Lastly, the Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics will be increasing its clandestine drug operations with its federal and state and local partners within the city of Jackson. Often what the Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics does is unrecognized. They're not uniformed officers, but they will be launching operations trying to reach and attack the drug problem within the city of Jackson. And as the governor mentioned, this will not solve all the crime within the city of Jackson, but it is a step in the right direction in utilizing our resources to help assist the city of Jackson with the crime rate and the murders and the drug problem within the city. I'd like to applaud the Mississippi legislature and its leadership for its foresight. When other states are talking about defunding police, cutting back on state resources for police and law enforcement, the state of Mississippi has stepped up. We just graduated a patrol class of 45. Our goal for the future is to have 600 highway patrolmen, 150 Capitol Police officers, 150 Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics agents. And as we increase the presence of state law enforcement, we feel we can make our community safer, not just those in the capital city. And I would like to remind everybody that the goal here is to create a safer capital city. The citizens of Mississippi should be able to visit their state capitol. They should be able to visit their state hospital, their state museums, without the fear of being raped, robbed, or murdered while they visit their capital city. This initiative will make a difference. It's a starting point, and we're looking forward to increasing our efforts over the years. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Tindall. Just before we open it up to Q&A, just want to point out that these saturation missions as it relates to the Mississippi Highway Patrol are not unique to the city. These are missions that the patrol takes on regularly. Just within the last 4 to 6 weeks, I am personally aware of one that took place in and around Oxford, as well as one over the July 4th weekend that took place on Interstate 10 in conjunction with Louisiana State Police and Alabama State Police. And so we are excited about the prospects of doing our part and look forward to working with our sister agencies in state, local, and federal law enforcement to continue to work to improve the situation as we find it in the city of Jackson. With that, I'm going to turn it over to questions and start with Scott.
Governor, has there been any coordination with the city of Jackson, or will these operations be separate and apart from what JPD and Hines SO do?
The Commissioner Tindall has spoken, and I'll let him speak for himself. He's spoken with the mayor, reached out to local law enforcement. We are hopeful that our efforts are going to help give the city an opportunity to focus on those areas where we are not. We're obviously going to be on the interstates, on the state highways within the city. We're going to be within the Capitol Complex Improvement District. There's a lot of work that needs to be done by the city. There are a lot of really good people at the Jackson Police Department, but they need more resources. They need more help. They need more officers. And I'm hopeful that our efforts are going to help supplement what they do, but this is not a police force that's going to be policing the streets in every area of the city of Jackson. That is not the role that the state plays. But I am hopeful that the city, as well as the county, will use a significant portion of the $87 million that they are receiving from the federal government to either spend that $87 million, in my opinion, either on their water system, their sewer system, or on local law enforcement efforts. The President of the United States, President Biden, said within the last couple of weeks that he encouraged all municipal leaders to use some of this money from the federal government for law enforcement to get control of the crime situation. Obviously, Jackson is not unique amongst intermediate to larger size cities across the nation that have seen a significant uptick in crime. And I am hopeful and I strongly encourage the City Council, the Board of Supervisors, and other local leaders to join in this effort, but also to invest in their local police. Yes, sir.
Just for clarity, when you mentioned extending those efforts to highways within the city, are you saying highways 80, 51, and 18?
The city, if it is a state highway within the city of Jackson, and I believe all three of those are.
About how many additional officers would this be on top of?
I'm going to let Commissioner Tyndall address that shortly, but my guess is going to be that his answer is going to be that given that this is an ongoing mission, that he's not at liberty to tell you the specifics as to the number of officers. But I will say this: when you combine the increased presence of Capitol Police, the increased number of state troopers, as well as the increased presence of the Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics, which you will not see, I can assure you that the presence will be felt. Commissioner, you want to address that?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Governor. And he is correct. We're not going to go into the details about the exact numbers, but I can tell you that you will see a significant increase in patrols. It'll be felt on the interstates. It'll be felt within the city. I can tell you that since these bills went into effect on July 1st, the Mississippi Highway Patrol has issued 87 traffic citations within the city of Jackson and over 14 DUI citations within the city of Jackson. So already there's been an increase in the presence, and that presence will continue to grow with this saturation. Yes.
Commissioner, granted Jackson has a major crime problem. How much of that crime problem is in the Capital District, the improvement district?
Well, you know, I lived in the Capital District for a number of the years that I was in the legislature on the Court of Appeals, and it was routine to hear of robberies, murders, cars being broken into and stolen within that Capital District for which I live. So I know there's a significant amount of crime, but look, there's a significant amount of crime across the city of Jackson. And again, we're limited somewhat jurisdictional. I mean, the Capitol Police are limited to the Capital Improvement Complex District. Highway Patrol is designated to patrol the states and highways and interstates throughout the state of Mississippi. So we're doing our part to help in the areas where we have that jurisdiction.
You mentioned your goal was 600, and I think it was 150. What are those numbers right now?
Right now, the Capitol Police has 81 uniformed officers. They have 114 pins. I believe the Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics is about to add 6 Bureau of Narcotic officers. Their number as it stands today, I've got that right here, is 92 MBN agents. In about 2007, they had 172 MBN agents. So we're looking to increase that numbers to what we saw 15 years ago.
And the troopers?
The troopers right now are at 520.
Okay.
The state legislature and previous legislation has allocated up to 650 highway patrol The most we've ever had has been around 617, and it was around that 2007 timeframe. Yes, sir.
Commissioner, will those on state highways within the city, are the patrolmen going to work alone or with partners? And also, who will prosecute those arrests? Where will they be held?
Well, jurisdictionally, the arrests have to be prosecuted within the jurisdiction in which the crime occurs, which will be either the city of Jackson or Hinds County. They will be working, and part of the saturation detail, as most of them, is for them to work in tandem with each other. They might not be together exactly the same place, but they will be close by. We've worked on our communication networks to make sure all our agencies for this operation can communicate with each other and be within a reasonable distance should any incidents arise. Jeff?
Yeah, for Commissioner and Governor Reeves, this is a pretty major expansion this year. We saw DPS authority power. Do either of you advocate or want to see a push more towards a true state police force? Is that something you would advocate moving forward?
That's not what I'm advocating for. I worked the halls of the Capitol during the legislative session. We did not request Capitol Police come to DPS. We did not request that the Commercial Trucking Enforcement Division from MDOT come. But we were asked if we were willing to take on those responsibilities, and we were glad to do it. And we do think that it makes sense that Mississippi state law enforcement be underneath an umbrella in which they can communicate with each other, particularly when you look at the incident that occurred with the protests at the capitals across the country. We realized how important it was that the Mississippi Capitol Police, the Mississippi Highway Patrol, the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation, and the Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics be able to come together and operate together in those types of situations. Okay.
Yeah, I would reiterate what Commissioner Tyndall said. Jeff, you described it as an increase in power for DPS. I look at it more as a step towards efficiency for state government. When you consider, from my perspective, and I'll try to put this in a way that everyone can understand it to the extent possible. The Capitol Police and Chief Byington have done an excellent job for many years, and for many years they reported to the Department of Finance and Administration. DFA reports to me. The Department of Public Safety reports to me as well. And so from my perspective, it really is just truly ensuring that the lines of communication are open. Because the one thing that I've seen living in downtown Jackson is there is significant communication and coordination between Capitol Police, between the Mississippi Highway Patrol, those who help secure the governor's mansion, Jackson Police Department, and Hinds SO. Are in constant contact and constant communication, and it makes sense, I believe, from an efficiency standpoint, that each of those agencies that deal with law enforcement from the state perspective are reporting through one channel to ensure really efficiencies of operations as well as efficiencies of financial assets as well. I think it made sense. The reality is in Mississippi, the most of the street-by-street enforcement goes to the city police or to the sheriff's office, and that's good, and we want to continue that. If you look at the number of police in the city and what that number has done over the last 5 years, we just want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to assist within this particular Capital Complex Improvement District on the state's highways and interstates, which hopefully will free up some of those in JPD to do more and more in other parts of the city. Yes, ma'am.
Governor, with the Delta variant said to become the predominant strain now, and then this morning Dr. Byers said that there's a number of adults yet to be vaccinated. What are you doing specifically to reduce vaccine hesitancy, and do you think there should be more of an incentive to get the COVID shots?
Well, I continue to encourage my fellow Mississippians to get vaccinated. We have worked exceptionally hard back in January and February to make the vaccine available and readily accessible for any Mississippian who wanted it. I also believe in individuals' right to make a choice from their health care perspective. If they, for whatever reason, believe that the risk associated with getting the vaccine is greater than the risk associated with not getting it, that's a decision that each individual has to make. But let me be clear. There is no question that a majority of new cases that were reported today and that have been reported over the last week or so have been the Delta variant. It appears to be highly contagious, and there are potentially bad outcomes. Again, I will point out that some over 90% of those hospitalized because of this recent uptick are not vaccinated. Of those that are of the new cases, over 90% are those amongst those who are not vaccinated. Again, I strongly encourage my fellow Mississippians to get vaccinated. It is the smart thing to do, in my opinion. It is the path of least risk, given where we find ourselves today. I personally took the vaccine in January, and so I'm hopeful that more and more Mississippians make that choice. Scott.
Governor, do you have any plans to try to step up encouragement? I mean, I know that we've made availability vaccines and everything. I mean, I wonder what else you can do, but do you feel we need to do something more because of the number of people who are not vaccinated and the growth of this variant?
Well, there's no doubt that the number of cases are more today than they were 3 weeks ago. Today was a particularly large number relative to even over the weekend. We had about 600 plus cases over a 3-day period over the weekend, and we had 600 reported today. What we've seen over the last 3 weeks or so is the total number of cases, and we're really seeing this throughout the year and a half. The total number of cases reported on Wednesdays and Thursdays tend to be more than on Mondays, Tuesdays, Fridays, Saturdays, or Sundays. That's just a natural progression of the reporting process. But again, we've got to continue to encourage individuals, and I believe that the mere fact that more and more people are now testing positive, and what we've seen. I've talked to Dr. Dobbs yesterday morning. I talked to Dr. Byers this morning. What we have seen throughout this pandemic is somewhere between 7 to 9% of those who test positive end up in hospitalization. Obviously, 3 weeks ago when we dipped below 100 cases per day, 7 to 9% of that number was significantly less. Now that this week we've ticked up, and yesterday had approximately 600 cases, 7 to 9% of that number is a lot greater than what it was 3 weeks ago. And so I'm hopeful that is individuals throughout the state that have chosen not to get vaccinated, who have shown hesitancy thus far, as they see and hear about people they know getting the virus, I'm hopeful that they will, in fact, get vaccinated.
Governor, for people that are hesitant to get the vaccine, do they think the virus is more, do they think the vaccine is more dangerous than the virus itself?
I don't know that I'm, given the fact that I have taken the vaccine, I'm not sure I'm educated to answer that question. But I'll tell you that I suppose that there are those who look at the risk associated with both and make an individual choice or an individual decision to that the risk associated with getting it is higher than the risk associated with not getting it, or they make the decision that the risk associated with not getting it is less than the risk associated with getting it. I disagree with that, but I also am not an elected official that thinks I'm, by definition, automatically smarter than everybody else and ought to be telling everybody what they can and cannot do with themselves. Yes, sir.
Governor, how much of the increase in planned enforcement is in response to the number of homicides rising here?
Well, again, the Mississippi Highway Patrol does saturation missions fairly regularly, dealing with specific issues. For instance, the saturation mission that was done last week was specifically in response to the fact that we knew we were going to have more traffic on Interstate 10 because it was a holiday weekend, we knew that people tended to enjoy themselves and hopefully wouldn't get behind the wheel, but if they did, we wanted to be there to make sure we got them off the roads as quickly as possible. And so what I would tell you is nothing is in direct response, but let's be honest with ourselves. The total number of homicides in the city of Jackson 2 years ago for the entire year was a little over 80. The total number of homicides in the city of Jackson year to date is about 80. And so we're on pace to double the number of homicides in the city over a 2-year period. That requires being addressed. And I'm hopeful that the city leadership, the county leadership, and everyone, state leadership, federal leadership, and everyone in between recognizes this, and it's imperative that we do all that we can. And what I'm here to tell you is the state, acting through our law enforcement agencies and the new powers in large part that we have been afforded through the legislative process, we're going to do our part to keep our people safe. Bobby.
Any updates on possible special session regarding medical marijuana or?
No. The only update I can give you, Bobby, is that as recently as yesterday, we had meetings with members of the legislature on a wide range of topics as it relates to medical marijuana and trying to forge a compromise that can be agreed upon by a majority of the legislature. So literally the meetings are ongoing. I know for a fact the latest one was yesterday. I don't know of one that occurred today in which my staff was involved. That doesn't mean that there wasn't one today, but I know that there was one yesterday because I got an update late yesterday afternoon. Progress is being made. There is a concerted effort by many to get to a potential bill. And once we get to a potential bill, which we believe can pass both chambers of the legislature, we'll look at the potential of calling a special session.
Along the line of special session, I think the federal money, at least the first about $1 billion, I think, is in the state treasury now. Is there any thought of calling a special session to try to craft a plan to work with that? Or
Well, the initial money that came to the state, so the as is often the case, federal legislation, when it passed the Congress, it was about that thick and it had several thousand pages in it. And I don't know exactly why they chose to do this, but just to give you an example of the complexities, each county received money, and the federal government transferred each county's money directly to the county. Each city or municipality, as defined by Treasury, received money. If you were less than 50,000 in population, which is all but 4 or 5 or 6 of our municipalities, if you're more than 50,000, they sent the money directly to you. If you were less than 50,000, they sent the money directly to the state. And so literally within the last couple of weeks, I've done a conference call with the leadership of the Mississippi Municipal League. We worked very, very closely with them. Liz Welch and her team at DFA worked very closely with the various municipalities. Some 350, I believe, total received various amounts of money. It came to us originally. They had to go in through the federal Treasury website, set up an account, etc. But a long story short, we've actually started sending out money to the cities, and the majority of those have actually received their money, even though we as a state were a flow-through. Now, with respect to the money that's coming to the state and our responsibility, I think most of the bandwidth within the legislative leadership has been focused on medical marijuana and looking at potentially getting a deal that looks like what most people expected that to look like. And the good news, unlike the previous federal money that came in with COVID, the deadlines on this particular money is years out. It's not at the end of this year or at the end of next year, and so we've got a little bit more time to deal with that. Yes, sir.
Could you describe kind of the changes that are being made with the Senate bill regarding the radar technology? I guess now it's the Highway Patrol can use it.
Yeah, I'm not an expert, but I did read the statute, and in essence, there was a prohibition against the Highway Patrol using stationary radar within the city limits of certain municipalities that were more than 15,000 in population. The legislation, which in large part was in response to what occurred on the night of New Year's Eve, or on and around the night of New Year's Eve, in which the entire interstate was shut down for some nefarious acts. That legislation required two things, or required one thing, which is in the event that in the event that an interstate is shut down, that the Mississippi Highway Patrol has to be immediately contacted. And secondly, it removed that prohibition of stationary radar by the patrol within cities over 15,000 in population. Did I get that right, Sean?
That's absolutely right.
Okay.
Does it allow local law enforcement to use radar themselves?
I don't think it addresses that, but
It doesn't address that. Of course, municipal police can utilize radar. It's the sheriff's offices that cannot, so it does not address that.
CJ.
Governor, you know, you're up here today with members of law enforcement present, talking about a major public safety initiative in Jackson, and no city, JPD, county officials are joining you here today. Can you speak to the optics of that and why you think they aren't here at the press conference?
Well, I presume they're not here because we didn't invite them to necessarily be here. We work very closely with the Jackson Police Department. We work closely with Hines SO, and we will continue to work closely with them. But they're not under our jurisdiction, nor are they underneath our control. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the commissioner has personally spoken with the mayor. Was reaching out to the chief and others within the city, and so we're hopeful that as we do more within our jurisdiction, and again, our jurisdiction is limited. Our jurisdiction is limited to the Capitol Complex Improvement District for the Capitol Police, and it's limited to the state's interstates and highways within the city limits. But I will tell you, I don't think it's a very good idea to go drag racing down a state highway anytime soon. Because while you may have been able to get away with it 3 months ago, I don't think you're going to be able to get away with it going forward. Follow up?
Well, yeah, for the commissioner.
Yeah.
Commissioner Tyndall, public records requests tell us that Capitol Police arrested 16 people last year. The year before that, 6 arrests. That's according to information obtained. Can you speak to how the efforts of Capitol Police will improve upon those numbers, especially with this new initiative going forward?
Well, and I can tell you in my conversations with the leadership, including the governor, lieutenant governor, and the speaker over in the House, as well as Chief Byington, our goal is to increase the presence of the Capitol Police within the Capitol District, and that means an increase in the functions that they do as a law enforcement agency. I think in the past, they've been viewed as more of a security firm, and that will change. They are going to perform law enforcement functions. With that, it's joint jurisdiction with the Jackson Police Department. And what we're not trying to do is supplant or take the place of JPD. They have their function. We're trying to offer assistance in areas where we can legally do it. And we feel like in the Capital District, which again is an area of the city of Jackson that typically people visiting the capital city, whether they're coming to their state capitol, the Supreme Court building, the Sellers building, the state museums, the fairgrounds, those are areas where the entirety of the state come in and visit the capital city. And we want to make sure when those visitors come, they're also protected, as well as the residents that live within that district. Going forward, we'd love to be in the talks with the city of Jackson on ways that we can help maybe outside of that with some joint task force and other efforts. MBN routinely does that. Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics routinely is working with joint task force with local law enforcement. And that will continue. There's just going to be a greater presence of it here in the city of Jackson.
A week ago, Councilman Tim Stokes had asked for the National Guard to come in to help with the problem. That resolution did not pass. It was tabled at the council meeting. What are your thoughts on that? You and the governor both.
You want to speak on that?
Yeah. I think the mere fact that Councilman Stokes is begging for help speaks to the significant problems from a crime standpoint in the city of Jackson. And I appreciate the fact that he and I are in agreement that we have to get crime under control in the city. Now, his specific request as it relates to the Guard is a whole nother matter. The Mississippi National Guard is not a police force. We would call in the Guard, for instance, in the event of riots, but they would be there to assist our Highway Patrol and our Capitol Police and JPD and other trained law enforcement officers to provide a presence. They are not an arresting entity. We don't want to have a capital city which has military uniforms spread throughout it. Number one, those officers typically are not trained for that. And number two, I don't think the look is very good. But I do think it's important to reiterate that Councilman Stokes' calls for help proves the need for more law enforcement in the capital city. Now, let me dare make a suggestion to Councilman Stokes and others. $42 million coming to the city of Jackson in federal money. $45 million coming to Hinds County from federal money. That's just shy of $90 million. Please, water, sewer, law enforcement. It's almost $100 million of which can be spent. Water, sewer, infrastructure, law enforcement. $100 million would go a long way towards helping significantly increase the numbers at the Jackson Police Department. It would also go a long way towards telling state and federal leadership in this state that they were serious about fixing the water and sewer system and other infrastructure challenges here. Everyone is very quick to come to the state and beg for money. Well, now they have almost $100 million. I think all of us would be a lot more likely to look for avenues for the state to continue to help the city if they spent these monies in a like manner. The other thing I'll say, and I think this is important, and Commissioner Tindall touched on it, when it comes to the Capitol Police and past statistics, I was involved in the legislative process for a number of years and have been for a number of years. And you may recall it wasn't that long ago when Capitol Police did not have arresting authority. That was changed just several years ago, late in my second term as Lieutenant Governor. And so with that comes less of a security function, as Commissioner Tindall described it, and more of a law enforcement function. And as we move more in that direction, what comes with that is additional resources and additional investment in our Capitol Police so that we can hire more officers, train more officers, and I think that is the direction that we are headed. Again, not to supplant JPD, but to complement JPD. And so, again, as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of good people at the Jackson Police Department. I've had the occasion to meet many of them over the last year and a half, and a lot of them work very, very hard, but there's not enough of them. And I'm hopeful that the city uses more and more of their resources to invest also. Yes, sir.
Governor, what do you see as the source of the rise in crime in Jackson, and how do you think that these changes are going to be able to help address those?
Well, the source of the rising crime in Jackson, I don't know that we have enough hours in the day to speak specifically to that, other than to say it is very frustrating for me and a lot of other people that many of these murders and homicides that are being committed now are being committed by individuals that appear to have been arrested recently and let out on bail. And so that's frustrating to me, and I'm sure it's frustrating to many other residents of the city of Jackson. And so we've got a lot of work to do with respect to the criminal justice system throughout the city and the county and really throughout the state. But there, again, I want to be clear to those outside the state. The issues we're trying to address in the city are not unique to this city. The increase in crime is occurring in virtually every intermediate size to larger city in America. Not in all of them, but in virtually every single one of them. And in large part, I think it goes back to this idea that some have that we ought to defund the police. Well, in Mississippi, we don't think we should defund the police. We think we should refund the police, increase funding for the police, and show more support for our police because they're putting their lives on the line every single day. And I, for one, am going to stand with these men and women in uniform. Follow up?
Yeah. And do you anticipate seeing highway patrol officers in other cities across Mississippi that have a higher population?
We have, I see state police in other municipalities all the time, and so we'll continue to see that. As Commissioner Tyndall mentioned earlier, we just graduated 45 new officers from the MLOTA, the Law Enforcement Training Academy, that went through trooper school. We did a trooper school last year. I think we've done 3 out of the last 4 years, if I am correct, which means we've graduated over 100 new troopers that we've put on the road in the last 3 years. Again, we want to continue to increase that number. Our goal is to get up to 600. This is a target that never is perfect, because every time we graduate a class of 45, we have some that retire, and so it's a constant battle. But we're going to continue to invest and continue to provide support for those state troopers who do a great job. Yes, sir.
This may be a question for the commissioner, but will either of the officers, either the Capitol or the state, be taking radio assignments or working on local police radio zones? Or are they going to be, writing paper reports for jobs that they're responding to? How is that assistance going to look like?
Well, again, we're focusing on the jurisdictional areas in which we operate. And so to the extent JPD might need help, certainly as we would in any area, we would respond to assist local law enforcement should that call come in, just as we would expect they would respond to assist us. So in that effort, yes. But we will have our common radio network. We will be operating on that within the agency. That will not be in direct communication on that radio network with local law enforcement.
But if somebody within the jurisdiction calls 911, they're getting JPD.
They're getting a 911 dispatcher that can notify JPD, but they can also notify Capitol Police. That's why we also put the number out there for Crime Stoppers. Crime Stoppers has been notified that if they do get a call related to something going on within the Capitol complex, to let the Capitol Police know, and we would respond.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm understood. So the Capitol Police would be responding to essentially 911 calls within the jurisdiction?
If made aware of it, yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Governor, a number of children have been admitted to the hospital due to COVID. Dr. Dodd said in a tweet yesterday. Is that just not enough to require students and staff to wear masks at school?
Well, I don't have any intention of forcing students to wear masks in schools this fall. I did have a conversation with Dr. Byers this morning and asked him to gather additional information with respect to those 7 young people who we pray for and pray that they come out okay with this. But I have asked for additional information in terms of pre-existing conditions, things such as that, so that we have a better feel of exactly what this variant is doing. Is it any different? Our initial thoughts are that it's just a certain percentage of kids over the life of this virus have ended up in the hospital, and that number of 7 is just an indication of the total number of cases ticking up. But we're getting more data, and hopefully we'll have a better understanding over time. As it currently exists, our reporting system is hospitals report to the State Department of Health based upon the data, the numbers, but certainly don't give names or any actual conditions. So that requires then the State Department of Health and their staff to reach out to the folks at the hospitals and try to determine that additional information. And Dr. Byers assured me this morning they're working on that as we speak. So, one more question. Yes, sir.
Governor, Mississippi has gone through 2 waves of the coronavirus pandemic already. It looks like we're heading towards number 3. What are your thoughts as we progress?
Well, I'm not sure that I would agree at this point that we are headed towards a third wave, but I don't know that the actual terminology matters. We are seeing a slight uptick in total number of cases and have since July the 1st, and that has the attention of myself and our leading health experts and everyone else. Again, I want to reiterate to the people of Mississippi, the people who are testing positive and the people who are being admitted to the hospital, over 90% in both cases are unvaccinated. And so if you are vaccinated, which there are just shy of 1.1 million Mississippians that have received at least the first dose, and I believe a little over 1 million that have gotten both. If you are unvaccinated, the best way for you to protect yourself against the Delta variant, or at least any other variant that has come before that has made it to the United States, the best way to protect yourself is to become vaccinated. And there are shots available, they are accessible, and by and large, they are free. And so I just encourage my fellow Mississippians to protect themselves. And for those who choose not to, I personally don't think that's a good choice, but I respect your right to make that choice. All right? Thank you all. Appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you very much.